Hi everybody, my name is Valkyrie, and today we're going to be discussing why I'm constantly getting dirty looks on my walks, or why my phone storage is always so low. And the reason for that is plain and simple. I like talking to myself. That sounds like a recipe for disaster and a quick call to the insane asylum, so let me elaborate. Since August of 2020, I've been recording myself speaking. It all started on my walks with an initial boost of self-confidence and this weight loss effort that I was on, but it slowly spiraled into something that I would continue to use for basically the rest of my life, or at least the last 2.5 years that I've been doing it. You can listen to the initial recordings that I made on my podcast. I did a little debrief on a lot of the stuff that I learned over those last 6 months, so I will put the link in the description down below. But I won't be talking in depth about those recordings today. Today is all about why I do it, the journey behind it, and how you can maybe incorporate some of the things that I do into your daily life as well. It's kind of a cool reflection piece that I decided to do early on in the year, and it's really cool to see what you used to say and where you came from and kind of tracing it back. So sit tight, relax, and enjoy. Like I said, it was some night in August 2020 when I decided to pull out my voice memos on my phone. I was going on walks initially as a weight loss effort and as a place to listen to podcasts and music where I would have normally listened to them on bus rides to and from school. I just started talking into my phone, and while the recording initially only lasted for 10 minutes, I could feel like there was this weight lifted off of my chest. I didn't really know that I was breaking down the walls that I had at the time, but I just felt like this was something that I could do for a lifetime. I finally had an outlet that I felt couldn't judge me or criticize me. I had someone I could talk to that understood, or at least tried to understand what I was going through, and that person just happened to be me. From that day on, I would record every 1 or 2 weeks, unplanned recordings, but just doing it whenever I feel I needed it. I remember walking for hours and crying and being filled with so much self-hatred and self-doubt and just recording myself, just talking it out, and then walking into the house like nothing ever happened. It was an emotional time, but a very necessary time for me and my personal self-reflection. So I've told you about the time that I first did it, but from that point on, what made me keep going back to it? I've learned, especially in the last year, that we have so many things going on in our brains that we can't even truly comprehend it. From thoughts to memories to instances to feelings, you want to remember them all, but then they're just gone in 1 second. There's so much going on to the point where it's almost impossible to keep it all contained. That's why you need a medium to expel some of those things. Lots of people enjoy journaling, and I did journaling for quite some time, probably from the end of elementary school to about the end of middle school, so I did it for quite a long time. I eventually lost touch with this art of journaling and eventually lost touch with the part of myself that continued to kind of like experiment with how I was feeling and write those feelings down. I wouldn't return to anything like this reflection-wise until 2020 summer. I think the reason why voice recording worked so well for me was because I felt like my brain was moving too fast for me to comprehend writing it down or typing it, and it just made more sense for me to just talk things out, almost like I was just talking to another person, another friend. I simply don't move my hand fast enough to actually comprehend what I'm putting onto the page, and even when I can move it fast enough, you don't want to read it. Like, trust me, you do not. Talking out loud helped me hear it and contextualize it and embrace it in ways that I had never done with journaling before. I could hear myself working through the problems that I had and working through the feelings that had been untouched for so long and finally coming up with reasons for why I felt the way that I did. I was developing various coping mechanisms to be able to handle some of the emotions that I didn't really know even existed. I think above all else, it was just fun. It was cool to be able to listen back and see what I was feeling, and especially now it's really nice having that documentation. At this point, I was just reasoning with myself and trying to speak different things into existence, which I felt was really helpful in analyzing how I truly felt. I have a rule that I use pretty much every day, and it's basically this. If it doesn't exist outside of your mind, it doesn't exist at all. I can think that I'm sad and think I know why, but until I write it or speak it into existence or hear it in some form of medium outside of that world, I will never truly know if I'm really sad or why I'm sad in the first place. There have been so many times where I've thought I was really angry, and upon further reflection, I actually just figured out I was disappointed or tired or just kind of in a mood that day. There were a lot of times where I felt like someone was making me feel a type of way, and no, it was just because I was craving affection and it was just manifesting as a crush or a sudden obsession. There were so many things that were affecting my emotions, and I wouldn't have even brushed the surface if I didn't start talking to myself. Now, of course, I don't do this when other people are in the room. What am I, insane? I would do it on my walks or in my room by myself or just any place where people weren't really around. And, as I've slowly started opening up to other people, I'm more comfortable recording in front of others, but it's still more of just a preference of I want to do it by myself. I like to be alone with my thoughts and reason with myself in a way that doesn't disturb anyone else, or I feel like no one else can be disturbed by what else I'm doing. There have been a lot of instances where I would just pull out my phone in my car and hit the record button and just set it on the seat beside me and just basically scream out what I was feeling. Probably not the best, but you can see what I mean. You can basically do this anywhere. I distinctly remember getting in my car from this family meetup kind of thing, and some boy had said something that really irked me. I got in my car and I was really irritated, and I felt like there was this kind of mental block that was prohibiting me from feeling anything else. So instead of listening to music, I pulled out my recorder, hit play, and put it on the seat next to me and drove home, just talking to myself, talking out my emotions, just all that jazz. Once I got home, I wasn't irritated in the slightest bit. I had completely expelled every emotion that I had felt that pertained to any negativity that happened that night. It was like it had never happened at all. I was even better than when I had left the house in the first place. Things like that are so powerful. The ability to get in touch with yourself and not only just feel those emotions, but look at it from an outside perspective is really, really important. That's another thing recording really helps me with. There's this thing I like to call the 2-time rule. Think about this. When you meet someone at a conference or a business meeting or even with a school project or anything like that, that is the first time you're meeting them. You can really hit it off and exchange information, but that really doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. You can have a million numbers and not have a single one call you back. And that's kind of depressing. Don't think about that. There's no guarantee that you'll see them again, but that's pretty standard practice for most people, right? Until you get that second meeting. The second time you meet someone is when the ball starts rolling. You can start to get more creative, kind of relax a little bit, learn more about each other, maybe even talk about business ventures or talk about your future together. That second meeting means everything. That's when the magic really starts. It's the same thing with recording. You hear yourself the first time you speak. You work something out, you start to feel good about it, and that's all great. But it's when you listen back and you actually understand why you felt the way that you felt, that's when you tackle the real important issues. That second time is crucial for understanding and reasoning with yourself and figuring out what you actually truly feel. It is definitely something that I will never skip out on ever again. Now, I get questions from other people saying, why don't you just talk to other people? Why don't you have just one person that you can kind of almost trauma dump on, or a couple select people that you can just talk to about certain different issues in your life? How many people do you know that would be completely comfortable with you sharing every feeling of grief and anger and disappointment and every frustrating emotion every time that you're feeling some type of way? How many people would that be? For most people, that number is really low, myself included. Also think about this. If you rely on someone else to be there every time you're feeling sad or angry or depressed, how are you going to function without talking to them when they're not around? Do you hold it in? Do you explode? There's not really that many positive options here. There's something special about speaking with yourself. You're the only person with yourself 100% of the time, and that's why this thing works. You know exactly what events led up to the way that you were feeling, and you can analyze them without having any foreign interactions. Don't get me wrong, it's great to get advice from your friends, and I still do that all the time, but, I really value the time that I have with myself and the time that I can take to kind of just analyze how I'm feeling without any foreign influence. On a regular basis, you should be learning from your emotions and trying to guide them from a chaotic state to a more solid one. Now, I know I talked a lot about how I started talking to myself and what the benefits are, but now I'd like to outline just a little bit of the questions I like to ask myself. We'll go through each question one by one. These questions seem pretty juvenile, but you can really be surprised on how they can change your perspective. Let's say you leave a family gathering and you're feeling kind of upset. Let's start with the first question. What are you actually feeling? You may think you're mad, but what is it really? Is it exhaustion? Is it disappointment? Is it something deeper? Talk it out and figure out what it is before you move on to the next step. This is where you go over the day in detail and try and figure out what events led you to come to that conclusion. It could be multiple events or one single thing that irked you, but whatever it may be, you want to get to the bottom of it. This can always take a little bit of time, but I promise you that it is really crucial in being able to recognize emotions and even recognize certain events that cause you to feel types of way. If you always end up feeling sad with a certain group of people or at a certain event or when a certain series of events takes place, then you know how to kind of change that scenario or avoid those certain situations. That brings me to my next question. Has this happened before? When you first start, you may not recognize it as well, but as you slowly start to accumulate more information on how you feel your emotions, it'll become a lot clearer. The thing is, you want to keep asking this question. It's super important for pattern recognition. It'll become a lot easier to recognize when you're stressed out or when you feel certain emotions, when you can track them back to other situations that you had worked through in the past. The third question is, can this be fixed right away? This is also really crucial in analyzing how you feel. If it's a feeling that you feel like can be solved with just a quick FaceTime or hanging out with family or friends, that's something that can be solved a lot quicker than something that takes a lot more deep reflection and kind of some time to sit on it. For example, I've been having a crisis about love recently. I'm moving around a lot and I'm extremely dedicated to my career, but I still want that special someone in my life. I'm sure a lot of teenagers can relate to that, and if not, you can just take this with a grain of salt. The thing about that is, I know that this is something that can't be fixed right away. I need to come up with ways to take my mind off of something like that without getting too focused about it throughout the day. But the difference is, if I'm upset the whole day about stubbing my toe when I get up, that's really going to be fixed with a quick 30-minute read and like a relaxing time in the morning. That's completely different than my crisis. That's not to say I don't talk to myself about the smaller things. Sometimes it's more obvious why you're mad or irritated. In those instances, it just helps to have these questions in your back pocket so you can quickly run through them and get through that. It kind of helps reassure you that everything's going to be alright. Now we come to the last question. What can I do differently next time? This is where all of the patterns come in. This can be the most difficult part for most people, and I know for me, it's definitely one of those things that I think about the most in terms of all of my emotions. I'm someone who wants everything to work out exactly the way I planned it, and I'm a very meticulous kind of thinker on a lot of things. So when something can't be fixed instantly, I get even more frustrated or even more feeling one of those emotions. But through this process, I've come to terms with the fact that sometimes it's better to wait, sometimes it's better to kind of just get everything out and just reflect on it a little bit and figure out, like, what can I actually do from here that is going to make me feel a lot better. I also know that I am a teenager and I'm growing into my body and my mind, and there's some things that you really just can't help but do. It can be confusing sometimes, and for any adults that are watching this, or any teenagers, young adults, anything, that's okay. And life is meant to be confusing and strange and weird, and you're meant to have all these questions. This is kind of just the basic framework that I use to kind of tie up loose ends and figure out, like, what am I actually going to do about the things that I feel, and I hope that that kind of helps you start with this kind of talking to yourself journey, or you can even use them to journal if you really want to. Let me know how it works for you in the comments down below. Just let me know what kind of medium you use in general. Thank you so much for watching. I really love talking about stuff like this, and it's taken me a long time to get to this point where I feel like I have enough knowledge and experience to talk about it, so I'm really glad that I'm able to share this kind of part of myself with other people. And again, just let me know how it goes. If you try it out, any questions you have, just feel free to just reach out. You can check the description for my podcast and my articles and any other mediums that I am currently on. And with that being said, I am Little Bird, and this is me signing off.